is we'll do something different this time. All right, our blessing to get us in the right mood. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Kedishanu mitzvatav
v'tzivanu
so b'divrei Torah.
Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with commandments and commands us to engage in words and matters of Torah. So since this is going to be a Q&A on Kabbalah, I've got a bunch of Q&A questions tracked, but I wanted to open it up. I'm currently reading a book that was recommended to me, and I highly recommend it to all of you. I'll put it in the chat when I find the link for it. It is Sarah Hurwitz's book called Here All Along, and it is absolutely delightful. It is delightful as a introduction to Judaism book. It is a delightful as an where do I want to take my understanding of Jewish theology book. It is delightful as a Jewish practice book. It is so all around. Obviously, I don't like the book at all, but I highly recommend it. I've been enjoying it, and I think it might make the basis of a future conversations. So if any of you are interested, you can let me know. But I'm going to put I'm going to put all the information about it, including a link to it, in our chat. Also, advertising, my last bit of non-sacred moment advertising. This is going to be our last lunch and learn under the auspices of Temple.Zion, where my tenure comes to a close on December 31st. I will still be available for all sorts of things, including this lunch and learn. So if we are going to continue it, My Jewish Learning has made it available, which is awesome, and I'm going to continue promoting My Jewish Learning things. So we'll keep the same time and day, 11:30 on Wednesday, and go forward, and continue to send me questions and ideas for what you'd like to learn about. I will cover anything and everything in the Jewish realm or Jewish takes on other things whenever you like. And for some of you who are interested in more specific topics, like I know Bob would like me to do Talmud all the time, we might in fact pick up a Talmud lunch and learn on a more regular basis as well that will focus only on Talmud. We might pick up a Jewish mysticism lunch and learn that will focus only on Jewish mysticism. So in January, there will be more stuff. There will be things on my website, which is currently jewishandorg, which is also in the chat. And the transformation of new things. My new project is called Open Door Judaism. And there's an email address for it as well, although my regular email address at Yahoo will still work. So that's, all right. That's enough of that. Enough of the promotional stuff. So Adina sent me a delightful email last week, and in that email, she asked a bunch of wonderful questions, some of which are questions about things I said that I regret having said because they clearly did not clarify things. So I'm going to go into this. And first of all, one of the things that I have recommended in the past is I've recommended if you're interested in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, you could read The Seventh Telling. The Seventh Telling is a wonderful book by a colleague and teacher of mine named Mitchell Shafitz. I very much like this book, and I will tell you that one of Adina's problems with it is one of mine, which is it is not a good book of psychology, or it's not a good model for marital communications. Adina, you are absolutely right, and it does get in the way. The characters' interactions in this book sometimes get in the way with the Kabbalistic teachings. But to the extent that we can extract one from the other, I advise us to do that. one of the things on a totally mundane point that that Adina asked is making a talit and tying the knots together is spiritual. That is absolutely true. And here is, I think, one of the biggest issues that we have in Judaism, and Sarah Hurwitz mentions it in her book in any number of ways. Jewish spirituality has been thrust through institutional Judaism into the idea that we must be doing it in a synagogue during a prayer service. This is not the crux of Jewish religious experience. Jewish religious experience is very much focused on the power of Shabbat, but not the power of Shabbat as a communal worship experience, but the power of Shabbat as a culmination of the week, of a week spent being mindful and thoughtful and finding ways to elevate our moments and have moments of blessing and moments of challenge where we have to cry out in frustration and difficulty. We are supposed to be, as people, encountering mystery all the time. And the degree to which we successfully do this, we might identify as our inner lives. Some of those mysteries are going to be our own personal mysteries. Why do I succeed or fail in these different situations? Why do I feel comfortable or uncomfortable in these moments? Why am I hung up on this thing that I continue to think about that I can't get out of my mind? Why am I anxious? Why am I fearful? All of the things that interfere in our everyday are part of our inner lives, and they are mysterious. There are many ways of talking about mystery. One of them is the idea that we talk about mystery as the idea of God, that God is a manifestation of mystery in our lives. However, that's only one way of talking about it. It's not even the only way. And how we encounter these things builds the fabric of the interplay between the normal and the sacred, the wondrous and the difficult. I would put it forward to us that in the course of any given day, if we could figure out a way to be grateful for something that we ignored the previous day, to be conscious of something that we didn't know about earlier, that we would elevate our day. And anything that helps us do that better is useful. Not necessary or commanded, but useful. And Judaism comes with a whole toolkit of options that I think are useful in this realm. That is, whether it is a cloaked in prayer or cloaked, as Adina put it, in a talit, a prayer shawl, which is supposed to be representative of our interaction, a physical representative of our interaction with responsibility for the world. How do we do that? Well, Adina, you talked about tying the tzitzit. So a prayer shawl, here, give me a second and let me get my prop. It just so happens I am in my office, and in my office, I have one of these so that everybody can see what I'm talking about. So what's a prayer shawl in Judaism? A prayer shawl, a talit, is any four-cornered garment onto which we tie fringes at each of the corners. And the fringes are explicitly representative of our responsibilities to the world. And we wrap ourselves in those responsibilities. How are they explicitly representative? Well, what these fringes are 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threads, 8 strings, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knots. Turns out these are knotted correctly. 8 plus 5 is 13. The Hebrew word for tzitzit has the numerical value of 600. 613 is the number of mitzvot, the number of commandments that there are in the Torah. When we wrap ourselves in a talit, we are wrapping ourselves in the fabric of responsible obligations that Jews hold as the way we react to creation. And what do I mean by that? I mean that creation, if we are going to be thoughtful about it, implies responsibility. We are responsible because we have been given something that is precious and wonderful. And we need to figure out how to use it, conserve it, save it, and partner with it to be better. So the talit serves as this symbol of those responsibilities in the way that the mitzvot serve as the vehicle, that our commandments serve as the vehicle for trying to figure out how to do better. Bob asks, you said the difference between normal and sacred, but can someone or something be normally sacred? Yes, this is not, let's get out of the computer world of zeros and ones. Normalness and sacredness are the same thing. They are just a very long range. To be immersed in the sacred is not to be the opposite of normal or mundane. It's to have elevated the normal or the mundane. So, for example, everybody, I have a cup of coffee every morning provided for me by one of the best baristas in the world, namely Ginny Real Freirich, who I am fortunate enough to be married to and with whom I live. So I get a supreme cup of coffee every day. It's pretty awesome. However, I could get accustomed to it and cease thinking of it as special. For somebody who has just come into my home and had one of Ginny's lattes, they will realize just how much they have been overpaying Starbucks for crappy coffee for a long time. However, if I'm not careful, I could get accustomed to this to such an extent that I will cease thinking of it as special. So one of the things I do is I have this daily cup of coffee and I am grateful for it. I am grateful to Ginny for it. I savor it. I try not to, guzzle it down. I try to turn that normal interaction into a better interaction. And this is how the Shabbat-centric nature of Judaism works. Shabbat only happens because we make it happen. If we don't stop and say, okay, I'm going to do something different on this day, whenever it is, then we could stop and do something different, because not all of us can do that on Friday night and Saturday. If we can do that, we create Shabbat in the same way that God did. Sarah Hurwitz cites Rashi in saying that, in fact, the seventh day is not a stopping point of creation, but a continuation of creation in the Jewish telling, because when God stops creating the rest of the world, God creates Shabbat, the Sabbath. In other words, it's a conscious act. It's a radical act that says the rest of our doing is made meaningful by stopping doing. And that's a creative act in and of itself. And that, as Bob has indicated, that we don't spend 6 days doing drudgery so we can have a seventh day of holiness. We spend 6 days attempting to make the normal holier, and then elevate ourselves on one day saying, wow, what holiness we have done. Made holier, made more sacred by our consciousness of it. All right, that was a couple of questions at once. Before I move on to Adina's subsequent questions, does anybody have any other questions on what I just said? Because the problem with rabbis, right, is not that we talk, that is not getting us to talk, it's getting us to stop talking. Okay. Think about it. All right, so here Adina asks a really important question. Can one truly learn Kabbalah if we don't have all the knowledge of the Talmud, the Tanakh, the Zohar, etc.? This is one of the biggest problems we have with Jewish learning, is that Jewish learning has been taught by rabbis and cantors and Jewish sages, especially for the last 200 years. As we entered the modern era of PhDs, as if it were a secret arena that could only be unlocked if we had, a master's level grasp of things. This is crazy. First of all, because it's self-defeating. If I have a toolbox that's useful, the more I use the tools in the toolbox, the better I get with them. In my kitchen, we have a whole host of knives. We didn't take out the biggest of them to help Sadie, our 7-year-old, learn how to cut potatoes. We took out the paring knife. And we didn't have her cut the big pieces of potatoes. We gave the larger knife to her brother to cut the potatoes into long quarters that allowed Sadie to therefore make smaller pieces out of those quarters using a paring knife. That doesn't mean that at some point or another, Sadie's not going to use the large knife. It doesn't mean at some point or another that the two of them together, which they did in making our latkes this week, use the Cuisinart, the food processor, because it's a grater. And making latkes is a long enough process without hand grating potatoes. So every piece of learning is on a continuum. I get more out of Jewish prayer because I know Hebrew. There's no doubt. Merely, and this is a Sarah Hurwitz observation to be another rabbi, merely the opening blessing of the day, Moda Ani, which we often translate as I give thanks, is better understood if we know that it's thankful am I. Because the real way of being grateful is to put the gratitude before the me. If I say, grateful am I am looking at the things I'm grateful for, not looking at me. And that's a lesson from the Hebrew. I can sing Moda Ani for all of you, all you want. And it can be meaningful and I can read the translation, but if I don't explain that in the Hebrew, for that prayer, the word grateful comes before the word, the pronoun I, there's a fundamental teaching that's not happening. All of this is by way of saying, the more we learn, the more profound the learning might become. But that doesn't mean that we need to be experts to start. In order to get the teachings of Jewish mysticism, we are stuck with the fact that from the advent of the Zohar in the 1200s and 1300s up until the middle of the 20th century, up until the beginnings of Hasidism, really in the early 1800s, but really into the middle of the 20th century, Jewish mysticism was viewed as a secret, only to be passed down to the most knowledgeable and most capable students of the masters of the secret. It was an esoteric teaching. So there is a culture around it that says we're going to make it difficult to learn. We're going to throw in a lot of jargon because we don't want it misused, right? The key was protecting Kabbalah from being misused because it was a powerful teaching that could be done wrongly. However, there are some fundamental teachings from Jewish mysticism that don't require esoteric ideas. And if we are to engage them in a non-jargon filled, non-Hebraic laced approach, it turns out they're really pretty helpful in the everyday. Mindfulness, which we just talked about in its own way, right? The mindfulness of being grateful of something that isn't me is a way of using gratitude to enter into mindfulness, is at the heart of a lot of Jewish mystical teachings. I should be grateful of the miracles, mindful of the miraculous all around me. It turns me into a better person, a more thoughtful person. I should be mindful of my reactions to things that are things that I don't want to react. When I get angry or when I get frustrated, those are not my best selves. And if I am more mindful, if I am more disciplined, if I am more capable of breathing through my anger or my frustration or even my sorrow or my hurt, I might be a better reactor to that moment. And wouldn't that be nice? I don't need to know the difference between Gevura and Chesed, between rigidity and stringency and justice and compassion, or know what they are in Hebrew, or know where they are located on the Sfirot tree, or know where they come from in the Zohar, or know the Talmudic sources for them, or know how David talks about them in the Psalms, to get that in this moment, as a parent, I might do better if I reacted with more compassion or more rigidity or structure, depending upon the moment. And God only knows I succeed or fail moment to moment on this. This morning, Sadie at 7 reminded me that she wanted to take her snow pants to school with her while we were in the car leaving our driveway. Now, I had helped her pack her backpack before this, and I didn't quite understand why she needed snow pants today on a day when there wasn't snow in the forecast. But it turns out that playing outside in snow pants is better than playing outside in your other pants, and all the other kids are doing it. And she really needed her snow pants, and I didn't listen before, or she didn't tell me before, and I was frustrated leaving the car, but it needed to happen. So the outcome is I made sure I stopped the car, I went back into the house, I got the snow pants, I gave them to my 7-year-old daughter so she could bring them in her backpack to school today. Did I do it in the best way possible? Probably not. Did I end it with a bit more mindfulness about how this was important and I should have been kind and compassionate all along the way? I did. I think I did better. And now, as the Jonathan thinking about this later on, my goal is to say, okay, am I going to be compassionate to the Jonathan who screwed up at 8 o'clock this morning? Or am I going to make myself feel guilty and berate myself for it? The person that I was a week ago or 2 weeks ago or a year ago might have been less forgiving to myself. Might have said, boy, John, you're a screw up. And the person who I am now says, if I'm going to learn from this, I'm going to have to be forgiving to myself. I'm going to have to take this moment as a learning moment, and maybe I can do better next time. And I'm more likely to do better next time if I'm less cruel to myself now. I'm more likely to create a sacred learning and a path of sacred parenting and daughtering for myself and my daughter if I'm mindful of this. And so the answer, Adina, is I can contextualize this with some Jewish concepts that come in the traditions of Kabbalah and Talmud and the Zohar and the Torah. And that helps me. But really, I'm talking about the psychosocial context of my behavior. Am I being a better person? Am I consulting good learnings to help me be a better person? Is there some place that I can go to help me contextualize it? Do I have the patience with myself to find a text that might help me learn this, or a community? How is my decision making leading me towards a better place? And am I giving myself a pass because I'm doing good enough? Or am I being compassionate about me not doing better to allow me to not just do good enough, but to do better the next time? Because that's a really interesting fine line. We are we are a society that allows ourselves to get away with a lot of stuff. Another example that Sarah Hurwitz uses is she says, there is nothing illegal about watching somebody in the street outside of our home do a criminal act. There is nothing against American law watching my neighbor beat somebody, a stranger, out in the street. It would be the right thing to do to call 911. It would be the right thing to do to go out and stop it. But I will not be held accountable by American law for allowing a crime to take place that I have seen. In fact, we have to put in protections for Good Samaritans in American law, for actually people who go above and beyond in trying to help. Jewish morality and ethics absolutely will hold me accountable for allowing two strangers to beat each other up in my presence. I am commanded to stop them. And I think we all ought to be heading towards that higher standard. The Jewish mystical part of this, Adina, is how do I help myself internally become the person who acts externally in a way that is a higher standard? And how is the mystery of the universe helping me figure that out? And Bob, it's not over your head. It's totally in your wheelhouse. It's in your wheelhouse because what we are talking about is the engineering of humanity. Humans are machines with an operating system. The difference between me and my laptop is that I can consciously engage with my operating system on a regular basis. I can put stuff in and say, okay, will this make it work better? Will this teaching be an update that makes me a better a functioning human tomorrow? Some of these we know right away. If I exercise more or more reasonably and eat more moderately, the likelihood is I'm going to have a better outcome as a human machine. Or at least that's what we think, right? Certainly every one of our doctors probably tells us something like that. So this is This is mechanical engineering for the body. What can I do in my operating system to get myself out for a run more often that will make me healthier as a mechanism and perhaps healthier as the operating system running the mechanism too? What process can I initiate? I can set an alarm. I can join a community of people who do exercise together at the same time. I can form a pact with a fellow runner across the world, and we can send each other reminders to get out and run. Or we can congratulate each other. Or I can use my Apple Watch to track my activities and use it as an incentive. I can experiment with disincentives and incentives. These are all like internal operating system stuff. This is the engineering of my brain to try to get better outcomes for my body. Or I can phrase it in religious terms. My body is on loan to me from God. I am a holy renter. And my job is to do the best I can with this body because I'm responsible for it and I got it for free. And it's a gift. And what am I going to do with it? How am I going to treat it well? How am I going to treat the mind, the operating system in it well? Is there some way of being grateful for my body that will inspire me to go out and do something crazy? I went out in 19-degree weather this morning and ran 6.25 miles and enjoyed myself most of the time. Most people would identify that as a crazy activity. But nonetheless, I did it. Now, either I'm crazy or I'm disciplined. It depends on your perspective. But I figured out a way to get my operating system to get my body to do something. And I frame it as a religious disciplined act for me. Because when I go out and run, I experience mystery more. I listen to a book that inspires me. I ask myself questions that I wouldn't ask myself otherwise. I have encounters with people that I wouldn't have otherwise. Did I tell this group about my Elijah encounter? No. Okay. So I met Elijah a couple of weeks ago, or maybe not, but it seemed like Elijah. So I was out on a run on the Friday following Thanksgiving. For those of you who don't know Western New York weather, while it was 19 degrees this morning, 4 days ago it was 50 degrees, and the Friday after Thanksgiving it was like 55 degrees. It was just gorgeous. I was running in shorts. And I'm running on a city street right next to a Delaware Park, and this man drops his bicycle in the middle of the street and sits down and is clearly in emotional distress. He's not injured, he's just upset, but he's in the middle of the street. Now it's a side street, it's not a main street, but I go out there and I hesitated for a minute as to whether or not I was going to help him. Not a minute, a second or two. Because I'm not a saint. But somebody's in distress and I'm the only one there, I'm going to help them. So I went out and I grabbed the guy's bicycle and I moved it to the side. I coaxed him to the side. This is COVID. I'm wearing a mask. He's not wearing a mask. The whole deal. And I get him to breathe and calm down and see that he has his phone and that things are okay and that if he needs to call somebody, he can. If he needs me to call somebody, I can, and the whole deal. And he I introduced myself. I'm Jonathan. He's David. We elbow as opposed to shake hands. And he gets up and he's clearly feeling a little bit better. And he's ready to go on. And he turns to me and he says, "Is it okay if I give you a hug?" Now, I'm a cautious person. I'm 5'3" and not exactly a football player. And this guy is taller than I am and probably less than half my age. But, so if I'm giving him a hug, he's going to be stooping down to me, which is kind of what I'm accustomed to from my son now as well. So it's okay. So I say, okay, I'm still wearing a mask and at least, we're outside. And I give him a hug and he holds on. He holds on for dear life and I allow him to. And he says to me, "Thank you. I never had a father. And I really appreciate this." And I say to him, "We all have fathers. We all have more people in this world that care for us than we know about." And he gets back on his bicycle and rides off. And before he rides off, he does the strangest thing. He looks at me and he says, "You're on the right path." Now, when I told this to Ginny, just the way I told it to you now, without my preamble, she turned to me and said, "Elijah." And I said, "I know." I mean, after speaking to this young man, I spent the next 10 minutes of my run in tears for the human connection, for the real ability to be there one for another. And what's the Elijah teaching? The Elijah teaching is the Jewish context, right? So Adina, here, I didn't mean to have a Jewish teaching for this, but I do. And the Jewish teaching, the supporting ethical teaching for this, the supporting mystical teaching, is that Elijah never died in Jewish text. Elijah went to heaven bodily, right? Rode off and we don't hear about Elijah dying. Which is why we open the door for Elijah on Passover, because Elijah is the wandering Jew, the one who's always with us. Elijah shows up in the Talmud and as a teacher all the time. But the moral teaching is that anyone who comes to us in need might be Elijah. And in that moment, we might tip the scales towards redemption, towards hastening the world to come. And what a powerful thing that is. And so here I was, and again, before I said Elijah, Ginny, when I recounted the story, the first word out of her mouth was Elijah. We don't know who we encounter. But the fundamental Jewish teaching on it is not that anyone could be Elijah, but that everyone is in the image of God. Not literally in the image of God, because God's image is too complicated for that. But everyone is somehow representative of miraculousness, of mystery. And to treat anyone as less than that is to treat the world as less than that, to diminish the wonder in the world. To go back to the opening of our conversation, to treat someone or something as normal that is explicitly holy is a demotion, a downgrade. When our job, our responsibility is to constantly be in the elevation and upgrade business. How can I take this encounter and raise it a little bit? Not make it, oh my God, I'm lost in the mystery and I'm having an ecstatic experience right here in the middle of the street. But how can I, move it a notch? We don't have to turn up the volume to 11 all the time. We'd go deaf pretty quickly. But it'd be really nice to go from, I hear nothing? Do I hear something wonderful or just a little bit better? To go from 1 to 1.5 is sometimes the best we can do. And that's holy work too. All right. I think that covers what part of Kabbalah do we believe one is able to understand without all the knowledge. And uh, and then, Adina, you ask, according to our dear friend and teacher, Larry, who is a wonderful teacher, Kabbalah is a way to connect to God. I guess that's the big question. How do we connect if we can't define God, that which cannot be defined? So here is at the essence a big Jewish question. If God is defined as mystery, how can we have something that prescribes methodologies for connections to mystery? So let's talk about the nature of mystery in order to do this. Jews don't like defining God because whether, as we've talked about, we're Maimonidean rationalists who say we cannot possibly understand anything that is God. Hurwitz quotes another teacher who says, the difference between divine intelligence and human intelligence is not a difference of degree, but a difference of kind. It's not that God is more intelligent than we are. It's that God's intelligence is not like our intelligence. It's so different as to be ununderstandable as the same thing. So if we are Maimonideans who see this distance, or we are students of Art Green who talk about the immanent nature of God, that God is present in all things if we only take notice. Or we are Martin Buber thinkers who say that God appears in the space between us when we subdue ourselves and accept that the person that we're speaking to is miraculous. When I have an exchange between two people and I recognize the other person as a divine teacher, as a source of wonder, then, and I listen more than I speak, or speak in a way that shows how much I've listened to the person I'm speaking to, then this space between us is where God happens. However we do this, what we are seeing is there are a lot of different faces of God. And they are available to us based on our openness and our need. Struggle is one of the greatest source of divine connections because we are so in need of help. I've been using Psalm 23 a lot lately. Yea, that I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Boy, is this difficult. I am in the valley of the shadow of death. I am in a place from which I cannot see life because of death's shadow. All possibility is eclipsed by darkness. And from that place, I declare, I will fear nothing, for God is with me. When I can see nothing else, sometimes I feel most clearly that I am not alone, whatever that means, however that is felt. Hurwitz describes her first attempt at talking to God by herself. A a Hasidic methodology called Hitbodedut, which is literally self-isolation. And the methodology is go out into a place where you cannot be heard and talk to God. Just speak to God nonstop for a certain amount of time, out loud. And it doesn't matter what we say. So Sarah Hurwitz says that she starts off this monologue with God with, I don't believe in God. I don't buy this. I'm uncomfortable. I'm anxious. This makes no sense to me. And just keeps on speaking until she is able to say, I am afraid and I am anxious and I am worried. And she begins to confront her own difficulties by just speaking. And eventually says, thank you, even though she started out not believing that there was any you to be spoken to. So the question is not, are we going to define the person, thing, entity, mystery, the whatever that we're speaking to, but are we going to become someone who can, in fact, converse with mystery and then maybe hear something in return? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I do know that the Jewish idea is that defining the person we're talking with, whether that person is a close friend or the divine, diminishes the conversation. All of you are wondrous people, fantastic representatives of the miraculous, divine emissaries on the planet who have something to teach each other and me if we only show up for each other. In so doing, we have said, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. And that's great because I look forward to the journey. So the precondition for talking to God has to be perhaps, I don't know who you are. Because if you are miraculous, I can't possibly define you. Is that helpful at all, Adina?
Amazing lesson. Thank you. I'll take classes like this anytime.
And so you had said that you remember me saying that the seventh telling is all one needs to know Kabbalah. And that,
I could be wrong.
And I may have said that, and if I said that, I was mistaken. I believe that it is a good entry point, but there are a lot of entry points into this, and I'm working off of an experimental model here, that any moment of success in conversation with somebody is only introductory. And it's only likely to work that one time. It's what's the thing that they say in the proviso in investment, the investment pre-language, right? Past performance is no predictor of future returns. If we get to say that about investing in the stock market, how much more do we have to say that about investing in each other? I've had a number of moments of transcendent experience in relationships in group settings, skiing, running, parenting, I can tell you there is no way of exactly replicating what happened before. And the amount of hours, days, months, and years I have probably wasted in trying to exactly mimic the setup that allowed me to have a great experience once, I can't tell you what a waste it is thinking that it's copyable. What's replicatable might be, maybe, the process that allowed us to be open to that moment. Bob is a bourbon drinker. Yes, Bob? I'm more of a Scotch person. And some of us have different vices and pleasures. What makes them wonderful is that each experience of the same thing is never the same. I can have my favorite beer with my best friends, and it will not repeat the good experience that I had the last time I had my favorite beer with my best friends. The chemistry might not be there anymore. The thing might actually taste differently. And this happens in every format. And so there's really this idea that I could get back and have the same prayer experience, the same meditation experience, the same thing, when the whole setup from a Jewish spirituality, mysticism, Kabbalistic perspective is all we can do is create frameworks in which experiences happen. We can set ourselves up as best we can, and then be open to the idea that something new might happen. That every experience is another pilot project, is another experiment. And that if we treat it as anything less than that, we're going to be slipping back on that sacred normal scale. We're going to be saying, this sacred success I had that got me from, 2 to 5 on the sacred normal scale or whatever, I can go back to it and expect to get +3 every time I go. Forget about it. That's not the way we work. It's not the way investments work. When I moved the bike first, before engaging Elias' show, was the thought he would follow his bike to the side of the road. Absolutely. I wanted to help him get out of the road. He had dropped his bike and was sitting in the middle of the road. The only way, I don't know about the rest of you, but forcing people to get out of the way doesn't work very much. Giving people incentive to move out of the way is the best we can do, right? So I helped him. I moved his bike to the curb, and because I think it's not good to leave somebody there to be run over, right?
Right.
All right. So what I'm going to put forward for us, I'm going to give us some homework. Think about something that worked to elevate a moment or experience in the past. A practice, an idea, a conversation, a word, a beverage, an activity, something that worked. whatever it may have been. And think about what it would be to set ourselves up to have that experience again. What could we do internally to open ourselves up to an increase in sacredness, an elevation of a moment at some point in the future again? What would that look like? What would that feel like? Because if we can begin to answer this question, what we are having is, Adina, a Kabbalistic conversation about mystical practices. Because the Jewish take on this is that my internal world had better be making a good impact on the external world. And that's, I think, a worthwhile goal. All right, our next meeting is going to be at this time on the first Wednesday in January. And if you haven't already sent me your email address, do so. I think all of you have, and that's great. I will include all of you on this list. And I am going to be out of town and taking a quick break, but we are looking at 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday, January 6th. There will be a new meeting address, and for now, we're going to keep this Wednesday time as the open topic time. I think there's clearly some interest in a mysticism class of some sort, where we'll focus more on the mystical issues. And there's clearly, at least for Bob, an interest in a Talmud class. So we may have, so this will be our weekly, and maybe we'll have some bi-weekly or monthly meetings on other topics. I'll put together a schedule and I'll contact all of you via email. Bob asked, is there yet a new rabbi for Temple Beth Zion? Yes, Temple Beth Zion hired an interim senior rabbi and affirmed her appointment last week. So her name is Rabbi Sobel, Rabbi Sharon Sobel. She's coming to Buffalo from Framingham, Massachusetts. She's originally really spent most of her adult life in Toronto. So her move to Buffalo in her mind is a move closer towards her people in Toronto. For those of you who don't know New York geography, we have a part of New York on the East Coast and a part of New York in the Midwest. And so Buffalo is the West Coast of New York. We are the only place in New York where the sun sets into a very large body of water. So wishing all of you an incredibly happy Hanukkah. Thank you, Ruth, as well. And wishing you health and wholeness and quick access, God willing, to the vaccine and safety in this crazy, crazy world. But know that I'm going to continue to be here for anyone and all of you. The new project we're working on is called Open Door Judaism. And for those of you who want to help support it, we will have God willing, a not-for-profit ID number, tax ID number, and a bank account into which to deposit checks in the next month. But I'll let everybody know. My phone number is going to continue to be the same. So yes. So my phone number, the Rabbi Jonathan at yahoo.com will be maintained for as long as Yahoo maintains it. Any other questions before we head off?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Happy Hanukkah. 2 more nights.
Bye-bye, Jonathan. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Great to see you, Phil.
See ya.
Thank you so much for everything.
Oh, to be continued.
I always have questions.
I love them anytime. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Rachel. Take care, everyone.